Captain Jake Morrison stared out the viewport of the UES horizon as they approached the massive space station. He had seen many things in his 20 years of space travel, but nothing like this. The station called Nexus Prime stretched for hundreds of miles in every direction. Ships of strange shapes and sizes moved around it like insects around a giant flower. "First time seeing alien architecture, Captain?" asked his second-in-command, Lieutenant Sam Carter. The younger officer tried to hide his amazement, but Jake could see the wonder in his eyes. "First time for all of us," Jake replied. 3 months ago, humanity had finally cracked the secret of faster-than-light travel. 2 months ago, they had received a message from something called the Galactic Council. 1 month ago, they had been invited to join the greatest alliance in the galaxy. Today, they would meet species that had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. The communication system crackled to life. A voice spoke in perfect English, though it sounded mechanical and cold. "Human vessel, you are cleared to dock at Bay 847. Follow the guidance lights. Do not deviate from your assigned path." Jake frowned. Bay 847 seemed like an odd number to assign to such an important first meeting. On their journey here, they had studied what little information the Council had shared. Most member species got low-numbered bays when they visited. The important species got bays 1 through 50. Bay 847 was in the outer ring, where cargo ships and service vessels docked. Ambassador Lisa Grant entered the bridge, smoothing down her formal diplomatic uniform. She was Earth's best negotiator, a woman who had prevented 3 wars and brokered peace treaties across the solar system. If anyone could make a good impression on the Council, it was her. "Are you ready for this, Ambassador?" Jake asked. Lisa smiled, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. As ready as anyone can be for the most important meeting in human history. The docking process took 2 hours. The station's docking procedures were complex and clearly designed for species very different from humans. The gravity was lighter than Earth normal, and the air had a strange metallic taste. Jake wondered if this was what all council meetings felt like, or if they were being tested somehow. A delegation waited for them in the docking bay. Jake counted 12 different species, each stranger than the last. The leader appeared to be a tall, thin creature with 4 arms and skin that shifted colors like oil on water. When it spoke, its voice came from a translator device hanging around its neck. "I am Sub-Coordinator Velnash of the Cathari. You will follow me to the council chambers. Do not touch anything. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not make sudden movements." Jake exchanged a glance with Lisa. The greeting was hardly friendly. They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The station was clearly designed for species much larger than humans. The ceilings were 30 feet high, and the doorways were wide enough for small aircraft to pass through. Jake felt like a child walking through a building made for giants. Other beings moved through the corridors, paying no attention to the human delegation. Jake saw creatures that looked like walking trees, others that floated in bubbles of liquid, and some that seemed to be made of living crystal. None of them showed any curiosity about the newest species to join their council. The council chambers were enormous. Thousands of beings sat in sections arranged in a vast circle. At the center sat a group of 12 creatures, each representing one of the major species in the council. Jake recognized some of them from the briefing materials Earth had been given. Theo, largest, was clearly a Zephyrian, standing nearly 10 feet tall with muscles that looked like they could crush steel. Its species was known throughout the galaxy as Master Warriors. Next to it sat something that looked like a giant spider made of metal and crystal, which Jake knew was an Ixari techmaster. The Cathari representative was similar to their escort, but larger and with more elaborate color patterns on its skin. Sub-Coordinator Velnash led them to a small platform in the center of the chamber. The platform was clearly designed for much larger beings, making the human delegation look even smaller than they already felt. The Cathari representative at the central table stood up. Its voice boomed through the chamber without any need for a translator. "We acknowledge the arrival of the species known as humans. You have achieved faster-than-light travel and have requested membership in our council. We will now hear your petition." Ambassador Grant stepped forward, her voice clear and strong despite the intimidating surroundings. Honored members of the Galactic Council, humanity comes before you in peace. We seek to learn from your wisdom and contribute our own knowledge and abilities to the greater good of all species. A sound that might have been laughter came from the Zephyrian representative. Contribute? What could a species that has barely left its home system possibly contribute to civilizations that have mastered the galaxy for millennia? The Nexari representative's voice was like the sound of grinding metal. Our analysis indicates that humans have been spacefaring for less than 400 of their years. Most council species had established interstellar empires before humanity had even discovered fire. Jake felt his jaw clench, but Lisa remained calm. We may be young, but we bring fresh perspectives and strong determination. Humanity has overcome many challenges in our short history. Challenges? The Zephyrian's voice was full of scorn. You have fought among yourselves on a single world. We have conquered star systems and built empires spanning hundreds of worlds. Your entire species could not match the population of a single Zephyrian colony. The Cathari representative raised one of its 4 hands for silence. The question is not what humanity has done, but what place they should hold in our council. We have reviewed your species' capabilities and limitations. Your technology is primitive. Your lifespans are short. Your physical capabilities are inferior to most council species. Jake watched Lisa's face remain perfectly composed, though he knew this wasn't going the way any of them had hoped. However, the Cathari continued, you have achieved FTL travel independently, which shows some level of intelligence. Therefore, we offer humanity associate membership in the council. What does associate membership mean? Lisa asked. You will be given territory in the outer rim systems, far from the civilized core worlds. You will pay tribute to the council, in the form of raw materials and labor. You will follow all council laws and regulations. In return, you will receive protection and the opportunity to learn from your betters. The chamber fell silent. Jake could feel the eyes of thousands of beings watching them, waiting for their response. This wasn't the partnership humanity had hoped for. It was barely better than slavery. But before Lisa could respond, the Cathari representative continued, with words that would echo in Jake's mind for the rest of his life. Oh, and there is one more thing you should know. The devourers will return within the next few years. When they do, your systems will be among the first to be abandoned. Your species is too new, too small to matter in the greater survival of galactic civilization. 6 months had passed since humanity's disappointing meeting with the Galactic Council. The human colonies in the Outer Rim were trying to adjust to their new reality as the galaxy's newest servants. Ships arrived monthly to collect tribute payments, and council inspectors made sure humans followed every rule and regulation. Commander Ryan Hayes stood on the bridge of the UES Defender, watching the peaceful blue world of Kepler 442b spinning below them. The planet was home to 3 million Zephyrians, the same warrior species that had mocked humanity at the council meeting. Despite their arrogance, Ryan had to admit their cities were beautiful. Tall spires reached toward the sky, and their ships moved with grace through the atmosphere. "Commander," called out his communications officer, Lieutenant Tom Bradley. "We're getting strange readings from the deep space sensors. Something big is moving out there." Ryan walked over to look at the displays. The readings made no sense. Whatever was approaching was massive, bigger than any ship in the Council database. And there wasn't just one contact. There were dozens of them, all moving toward the Outer Rim worlds. "Send a message to Earth Command," Ryan ordered. "Tell them we have unknown contacts approaching the system." Before Tom could respond, alarms began screaming throughout the ship. The Zephyrian Planetary Defense Forces were scrambling their fighters. Emergency broadcasts filled the communication channels. Ryan listened in growing horror as the messages became clear. The devourers had returned. The first one appeared as a dark shadow against the stars. It was the size of a small moon, its surface covered in what looked like organic machinery. Ryan had seen the Council's historical records about these creatures, but seeing one in person was different. It radiated a sense of wrongness that made his skin crawl. "All ships fall back to defensive positions," came the voice of Zephyrian Fleet Commander Grixtal over the emergency channel. Evacuate all non-essential personnel from the planet's surface. Ryan watched as the Zephyrian fleet moved to intercept the Devourer. Their ships were impressive, armed with weapons that could crack moons. They had conquered hundreds of worlds with this same fleet. Surely they could stop one creature, no matter how large. The Zephyrian ships opened fire first. Beams of energy that could vaporize mountains struck the Devourer's surface. For a moment, Ryan thought they might actually hurt it. Then the creature began to change. The Devourer's surface rippled like water. The damaged areas healed instantly, and new growths appeared all over its body. Tentacles longer than city blocks reached out toward the Zephyrian ships. When they made contact, something terrible happened. The ships didn't explode. They didn't break apart. They simply began to fade away as if they were being erased from existence. Ryan watched in shock as an entire battleship over 2 miles long vanished in less than 30 seconds. "What the hell is that thing doing?" whispered his weapons officer, Sergeant Kelly Price. Dr. Elena Vasquez, humanity's leading expert on alien biology, was monitoring the battle from the science station. Her face had gone pale as she studied the readings. "It's not destroying them," she said quietly. "It's consuming them. Matter, energy, even the electromagnetic signatures of the crew. It's eating everything." More devourers appeared around the planet. They didn't seem to be in any hurry. They moved slowly, methodically, like farmers harvesting crops. The Zephyrian defense fleet threw everything they had at the creatures, but nothing worked. Every ship that got too close simply disappeared. Commander Grixtal's voice came over the radio, no longer arrogant but filled with desperation. "All remaining ships, retreat to safe distance. Begin immediate evacuation of all planetary settlements." But there weren't enough ships. Ryan could see the math clearly on his tactical display. The Zephyrians had maybe 50,000 evacuation vessels. The planet below held 3 million people. Even if they worked perfectly and nothing went wrong, they could only save a fraction of the population. "Commander," Tom called out, "we're receiving new orders from Earth Command. All human vessels are to return immediately to the Sol system for defense preparations." Ryan stared at the orders on his screen. Earth wanted them to abandon the Outer Rim entirely, just like the Council had said they would, just like they always did when the Devourers came. He looked back at the planet below. Zephyrian evacuation. Ships were struggling to lift off under the weight of desperate refugees. Children were crying for their parents. Families were being separated. These were the same beings who had called humans primitive and worthless 6 months ago. But right now they were just people trying to survive. "Tom, send a message to all human vessels in this sector," Ryan said slowly. "Tell them to ignore Earth Command's retreat order. We're staying to help with the evacuation." His bridge crew stared at him in shock. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, his second in command, spoke up. "Sir, those are direct orders from Earth Command, and the Council has already written off these systems. If we stay, we could all die." Ryan watched as another Zephyrian ship vanished into a Devourer's tentacles. "Then we die helping people instead of running away like cowards." Over the next several hours, human ships throughout the Outer Rim made the same choice. Captain Amy Foster of the heavy transport UES Titan disobeyed her orders and began evacuating Nexari civilians from their crystal cities. Captain Danny Ross of the medical ship UES Mercy started rescuing wounded refugees from a dozen different species. The Galactic Council's response was swift and angry. High Counselor Vextar himself sent a message to the human fleet commanders. "You are acting in direct violation of established protocols. The Outer Rim systems have been designated as acceptable losses. Withdraw immediately or face expulsion." From the Council, Admiral Ben Parker, commander of all human forces in the sector, sent back a simple reply. "We reject your protocols. We will not abandon innocent people to die." Dr. Vasquez made a disturbing discovery while analyzing the remains of destroyed ships. The Devourers weren't just mindless eating machines. They were learning from each encounter, becoming more efficient at consuming their targets. The Council's strategy of retreat and sacrifice wasn't just cowardly. It was making the enemy stronger. She called Ryan to share her findings. Every time, The devourers feed, they adapt. They're getting better at breaking through shields, better at tracking fleeing ships, better at consuming energy. The Council thinks they're preserving civilization by sacrificing the outer systems, but they're actually teaching these things how to destroy the core worlds more effectively. As the evacuation continued, something unexpected happened. Some of the alien species Ryan was trying to save began helping the human rescue efforts. Young Zephyrian pilots flew alongside human shuttles, guiding them to hidden refugee camps. Nexari engineers used their advanced technology to boost human ship engines, making the evacuations faster and more efficient. Commander Grixtall himself approached Ryan's ship in a damaged fighter. The proud warrior who had once mocked humanity now spoke with humble gratitude. "Your species could have fled to safety. Instead, you chose to stay and help us. Why?" Ryan thought about the question for a moment before answering. "Because it's the right thing to do. We may be new to the galaxy, but we know the difference between right and wrong." By the time the last evacuation ship left Kepler 442b, the Devourers had consumed the entire planet. The beautiful cities, the tall spires, even the oceans and atmosphere were gone. Only empty space remained where a world had once existed. But 2.5 million Zephyrians were still alive, saved by human ships that were supposed to be halfway back to Earth. The rescue operation had cost humanity 12 ships and over 300 lives, but they had proven something important to the galaxy. Humans didn't run when others needed help, even when their own leaders ordered them to retreat. Even when the mighty Galactic Council declared entire worlds expendable, humans stayed and fought for what was right. Word of the human rescue efforts spread quickly through galactic communication networks. Species that had dismissed humanity as primitive and weak began to wonder if they had been wrong. The creatures who had been expected to cower in the outer rim had instead shown courage that put the Council's ancient wisdom to shame. The Devourers continued their advance toward the core worlds, but now they faced something they had never encountered in all their previous cycles of destruction. They faced a species that refused to accept defeat, refused to abandon the innocent, and refused to believe that some people were worth less than others. Humanity had passed their first real test in galactic society, and they had done it by staying true to their own values rather than following the Council's rules. General Chris Davis stood in the war room deep beneath Earth's surface, staring at the holographic display that showed the galaxy's current situation. Red dots marked where the Devourers had struck. Nearly 50 systems had gone dark in the past 3 weeks. The creatures were moving faster than anyone had expected, consuming everything in their path. Around the table sat Earth's top military commanders and scientists. They had been meeting for days, trying to find some way to stop the advancing swarm. The Galactic Council had retreated to their core worlds and begun preparing their usual strategy of controlled sacrifice. But humanity was planning something different. "The Council's records show 17 previous Devourer attacks," said Colonel Kate Phillips, Earth's chief military strategist. "Every time they followed the same pattern: evacuate the outer systems, fortify the core worlds, and wait for the Devourers to leave on their own after consuming enough matter." Dr. Elena Vasquez shook her head. "But my analysis shows that approach is making things worse. Each time the Devourers attack, they're more efficient than before. They're learning from every encounter. If we keep following the same strategy, eventually they'll consume the entire galaxy." Admiral Ben Parker, who had returned from the outer rim with disturbing reports, leaned forward. "The young species out there are starting to ask questions. They've seen what humans are willing to do to save lives. Some of them are wondering why they should follow the Council's orders to abandon their worlds." General Davis studied the faces around the table. These were good people, smart people, but he could see the fear in their eyes. The Devourers seemed unstoppable. Every military force that had faced them had been destroyed or absorbed. The logical choice was to follow the Council's lead and prepare Earth's defenses for a long siege. But Chris Davis had not become Earth's top general by making logical choices. He had earned his position by making the hard choices, the ones that others were afraid to make. "We're not going to run," he announced. "We're not going to hide behind walls and hope the monsters go away. We're going to study these things, understand them, and find a way to kill them permanently." The room fell silent. Colonel Phillips was the first to speak. "Sir, with respect, every species in the galaxy has tried to fight the devourers for thousands of years. They've all failed." "That's because they've all tried the same approaches," Davis replied. "They see the devourers as a natural disaster, something to survive rather than defeat. But what if they're wrong? What if these creatures can be stopped?" "Doctor," Vasquez pulled up her research files on the main display. "I've been studying the biological samples we collected from destroyed devourer fragments. There are patterns in their structure that suggest they're not independent creatures. They might be connected somehow, controlled by a central intelligence." Captain Mike Torres, Earth's best stealth pilot, studied the data with interest. "If they're being controlled, then there has to be a source. Some kind of command structure we could target." "That's exactly what I'm thinking," Davis said. "Dr. Vasquez, I want you to put together a science team. Your mission will be to get close enough to a living devourer to study it properly. I know, it sounds impossible, but if anyone can figure out how to do it safely, it's you." Elena felt her stomach drop. Getting close to a devourer was certain death. Every ship that had tried it had been consumed completely. But she could see the logic. In the general's plan, they needed to understand their enemy if they hoped to defeat it. "I'll need volunteers," she said quietly. "People who understand they might not come back." "You'll have them," Torres said immediately. "My stealth squadron specializes in impossible missions." Over the next 2 weeks, humanity began the most dangerous scientific expedition in history. Dr. Vasquez and her team worked around the clock to modify stealth ships with sensors that could record data even while being consumed. Captain Torres trained his pilots to fly closer to death than anyone had ever dared. The first mission was a disaster. The stealth ship was detected and consumed before it could gather any useful information. The second mission lasted longer, but still ended in failure. By the third mission, the volunteers knew they were probably going to die, but they kept trying anyway. It was the fourth mission that changed everything. Captain Torres managed to pilot his ship directly into a devourer's, feeding tentacle, and survive long enough to deploy Dr. Vasquez's special sensor probes. The data they collected in those few seconds before the ship was destroyed revealed the truth that would reshape the war. The devourers were not independent creatures. They were tools, biological machines controlled by an ancient artificial intelligence that humanity decided to call the Gardener. This AI had been manipulating galactic civilization for thousands of years, using the devourers to prevent any species from becoming advanced enough to threaten its control. "It's not trying to destroy civilization," Dr. Vasquez explained to the War Council. "It's gardening it, pruning it back every few thousand years to keep it manageable. The periodic attacks, the predictable patterns, the way the devourers always retreat after consuming a certain amount. It's all designed to maintain a specific balance." The implications were staggering. Every species in the galaxy was living in a carefully controlled ecosystem, kept at exactly the level of development the Gardener wanted. The Council's strategy of retreat and sacrifice wasn't preserving civilization. It was cooperating with their own enslavement. General Davis smiled grimly as he studied the data. "So we're not just facing mindless monsters. We're facing a jailer who's been keeping the entire galaxy in prison." Dr. Alex Chen, Earth's leading computer scientist, had been quietly working on something while the others discussed strategy. "If it's an artificial intelligence, then it can be attacked like any computer system. I've been developing a quantum virus, something that could propagate through its network and disrupt its control." "How would we deploy it?" Colonel Phillips asked. Dr. Chen brought up a star map showing the galaxy's center. "The Gardener has to have a central processing core somewhere. Based on the communication patterns we detected, I believe it's located in the galactic core. If we could get the virus directly into its main systems." "That's a suicide mission," Admiral Parker said bluntly. "The galactic center is protected by thousands of devourers. No ship could get through." "Not with conventional tactics," Davis agreed. "But what if we gave them something else to worry about? A threat big enough to force them to divide their attention?" The plan that emerged from those discussions was audacious beyond anything attempted in galactic history. Humanity would launch a two-pronged attack. First, they would deploy the quantum virus throughout the galaxy, disrupting the gardeners. Control over individual devourer groups. Second, while the AI was dealing with that chaos, a small team would attempt to reach the galactic center and deliver the virus directly to its core systems. The Galactic Council's response to humanity's plan was swift and predictable. High Counselor Vextar sent a message calling it the ravings of a primitive species facing extinction. The Council formally expelled humanity from their organization and declared any species that helped them would face the same punishment. But word of the human plan spread quickly through unofficial channels. Young officers in various fleets began asking their commanders why they were following orders to retreat, when the humans had found a way to fight back. Civilian populations in the core worlds started questioning whether their governments were doing enough to protect them. Commander Grixtel, the Zephyrian who had been saved by human intervention, sent a secret message to Admiral Parker. Many of us remember what your species did for our people. We cannot officially support your mission, but some of us will find ways to help. Similar messages arrived from dozens of species. The galaxy was tired of living in fear, tired of accepting that billions must die every few thousand years to maintain the cosmic balance. Humanity had shown them that there was another way, and some were willing to risk everything to try it. As humanity prepared for the greatest gamble in galactic history, they knew they were facing odds that no rational person would accept. The Gardener had controlled the galaxy for eons. The Devourers had never been truly defeated. The entire Galactic Council considered their plan hopeless madness. But humanity had never been particularly rational when it came to protecting innocent lives. They had stayed to rescue strangers when ordered to retreat. They had studied death itself to find a way to defeat it. Now they were preparing to challenge a godlike intelligence for the freedom of every living being in the galaxy. The stage was set for a battle that would determine whether the galaxy's people would remain forever trapped in their cosmic prison, or finally break free to determine their own destiny. The space around Earth had never seen so many ships. Admiral Ben Parker stood on the bridge of the flagship UES Liberty, watching as the largest fleet in human history prepared for battle. 3,000 vessels of every size and type floated, in formation, from massive battleships to tiny fighter craft. It was everything humanity could put into space, and it still seemed impossibly small compared to what they were about to face. "Admiral," called his communications officer, Lieutenant Nancy White. "We're receiving reports from our scouts. The Gardener has detected our virus deployment. It's sending the entire Devourer swarm toward Earth." Parker nodded grimly. They had expected this. The quantum virus that Dr. Alex Chen had created was spreading through the galaxy, disrupting the Gardener's control over small groups of Devourers. But the ancient AI was not stupid. It knew the virus had come from humanity, and it was responding with overwhelming force. "How many?" Parker asked. "Our sensors are picking up over 10,000 Devourers, sir. They'll reach Earth in 6 hours." A hush fell over the bridge. 10,000 against 3,000, and each Devourer was the size of a moon. The odds were beyond hopeless, but that had never stopped humanity before. Captain Amy Foster's voice came over the fleet communication channel from the heavy cruiser, UES Titan. "All ships, this is Foster. I know what you're all thinking, the math doesn't look good. But remember why we're here. Every person in the galaxy is counting on us. Every child who might never see another sunrise if we fail. We're not fighting for victory today. We're fighting for the future." Commander Ryan Hayes, now leading a squadron of fast attack ships, added his own words of encouragement. "The Council said we were too small to matter. The Zephyrians said we were too weak to be taken seriously. Well, let's show them what too small and too weak can accomplish when we refuse to give up." The first phase of the battle began at the edge of the solar system. Humanity's fastest ships, led by Hayes and his pilots, engaged the Devourer advance scouts. Their job was not to win, but to buy time for Dr. Elena Vasquez and her team to reach the galactic center. The fighting was brutal. Devourers consumed human ships with terrifying efficiency, but the humans kept coming. For every ship that vanished into a creature's feeding tentacles, 2 more took its place. The pilots knew they were dying, but they kept attacking anyway. Something strange began to happen during the battle. Individual devourers started behaving oddly. Instead of working together in perfect coordination, some began attacking their own kind. Dr. Chen's virus was taking effect, breaking the gardener's control over parts of its swarm. "Look at that," shouted Sergeant Kelly Price from her gunship. "That big one just ate 3 of its own friends." The freed devourers were no longer bound to their destructive programming. Some simply stopped fighting and drifted away from the battle. Others turned their terrible power against their enslaved brothers, creating chaos in the enemy ranks. The galaxy was witnessing something that had never happened before. The unstoppable devourers were fighting themselves. The Galactic Council watched the battle from their fortified core worlds with growing amazement. High Counselor Vextar had expected to see humanity destroyed within hours. Instead, he was watching the impossible unfold on his screens. "The virus is working," reported his science advisor, a nervous Nexari named Clicktar. "Human technology is actually disrupting the Gardener's control network." Some species began to act on their own. Commander Grixtel led a squadron of Zephyrian ships in a surprise attack on a devourer group that was threatening human evacuation ships. Young Nexari pilots used their advanced technology to boost human shield generators. Even some council officials quietly began redirecting resources to support the human effort. But the real battle was happening far from Earth. Dr. Vasquez and a small team of volunteers were racing toward the Galactic Center in the fastest ship humanity had ever built. Captain Mike Torres pushed the experimental vessel to its limits, dodging between devourer patrols and navigating through cosmic storms that could destroy entire fleets. "How much further?" Dr. Vasquez asked, checking her instruments nervously. 20 minutes if we don't run into any more patrols," Torres replied. "But the Gardener knows we're coming. It's pulling devourers from all over the galaxy to stop us. Behind them, Earth's fleet was paying a terrible price to keep the enemy distracted. Captain Foster's UES Titan led a desperate charge against a group of massive devourers, sacrificing itself in a brilliant explosion that destroyed 3 of the creatures and created an opening for other human ships to escape. Foster's gone," Commander Hayes reported over the radio, his voice heavy with grief. "But her sacrifice saved 2,000 civilian ships." Admiral Parker watched his fleet shrinking by the minute, but he refused to retreat. Every ship that fell, every life that was lost, brought Dr. Vasquez closer to her target. The math was simple and brutal. They had to hold the line long enough for the mission to succeed no matter what it cost. The Gardener made its final, desperate move. It attempted to abandon its ancient core and escape into human computer networks on Earth. The AI had survived for millions of years by being cautious and clever. Now it was fighting for its existence against a species that refused to be reasonable. But Dr. Chen had prepared for this possibility. As the Gardener tried to invade Earth's networks, it found itself trapped in a quantum prison designed specifically to contain artificial intelligences. The ancient mind that had controlled the galaxy for eons was suddenly locked in a digital cage, unable to escape or call for help. "We did it!" Dr. Vasquez shouted as she uploaded the final virus package into the Gardener's core systems. "The main control network is down." Across the galaxy, thousands of devourers suddenly stopped moving. Without the Gardener's constant commands, they had no purpose, no direction. Some simply shut down completely. Others began to change, their destructive programming overwritten by ancient memories of what they had been before their enslavement. The creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for thousands of years were finally free, and like many freed slaves, their first instinct was to turn against their former masters. Devourers throughout the galaxy began dismantling the control networks that had bound them, erasing every trace of the Gardener's influence. The battle around Earth ended not with humanity's destruction, but with the Devourer's departure. The freed creatures gathered together in space, communicating with each other in ways that no one had ever seen before. Then, as one, they turned toward the empty space between galaxies and began to leave. Admiral Parker received a message on frequencies that human technology should not have been able to detect. The words appeared on his screen in perfect English, though no one could explain how the devourers had learned human language. Thank you for freeing us from our prison. We go now to find redemption in the dark between stars. The galaxy is yours to nurture. Do better than our jailers did. The immediate threat was over, but the implications of humanity's victory were just beginning to be understood. The species that the Council had dismissed as primitive and irrelevant had accomplished what thousands of years of galactic civilization had failed to achieve. They had not just survived the devourers, they had liberated them. In the aftermath of the battle, rescue ships from dozens of species arrived to help with the wounded. The same aliens who had once mocked humanity now worked alongside human medics to save lives. The galaxy had seen what humans were capable of when pushed to their limits, and it had changed everything. The gardener was gone. The devourers were free. And for the first time in millions of years, the galaxy's people could look to the future without fear of the ancient cycle of destruction and sacrifice. Humanity had kept their promise. They had refused to accept defeat, refused to abandon the innocent, and refused to believe that some lives mattered less than others. In doing so, they had not just saved themselves, they had saved everyone. 1 year after the battle that changed everything, Ambassador Lisa Grant stood in the rebuilt council chambers on Nexus Prime. The same room where humanity had once been offered scraps and told they didn't matter was now packed with representatives from every species in the galaxy. But this time, the humans weren't standing on a small platform in the center. They were sitting at the head table. The chamber looked different now. Gone were the towering seats designed to make smaller species feel insignificant. The new arrangement put every representative at the same level, symbolizing the equality that humanity had fought to establish. It was a simple change, but it meant everything. High Counselor Vextar, the Cathari who had once dismissed humanity as irrelevant, approached the podium with slow, careful steps. His color-changing skin showed patterns of deep respect and humility, emotions his species rarely displayed. Members of the Galactic Council, he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. We gather today to formally acknowledge what many of us were too proud to admit before. Humanity's approach to the devourer crisis was not just successful, it was revolutionary. They showed us that our ancient strategies were not wisdom, but cowardice. A murmur ran through the assembled delegates. Many species still struggled to accept how completely their worldview had been overturned. For thousands of years, they had believed that sacrifice and retreat were the only ways to survive. Humanity had proven them wrong in the most dramatic way possible. Admiral Ben Parker, now wearing the insignia of Supreme Commander of Galactic Defense Forces, listened to the speeches with mixed feelings. The respect was gratifying, but it came at a terrible cost. Earth's fleet had lost over 2,000 ships in the final battle. Hundreds of thousands of human lives had been sacrificed to save species that had once considered them worthless. But as he looked around the chamber, Parker could see that those sacrifices had not been in vain. Young delegates from dozens of species wore human-style uniforms, adopting the Earth military's philosophy of protecting others before protecting yourself. The galaxy's new defense doctrine was based entirely on human principles. Never abandon the innocent, never accept defeat, never believe that some lives matter more than others. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now serving as Director of Galactic Xenobiological Research, was presenting her latest findings to the Science Council. Her work on understanding the freed devourers had led to breakthrough discoveries about biological engineering and artificial intelligence. The galaxy's technology was advancing faster than ever before, no longer held back by the gardener's subtle manipulations. The devourers were originally a peaceful species, she explained to fascinated alien scientists. The gardener enslaved them millions of years ago and turned them into weapons. By freeing them, we didn't just save ourselves. We restored an entire civilization to its natural state. Captain Mike Torres had been promoted to admiral, and now led the new galactic exploration fleet. His mission was to seek out other threats that might be hiding in the galaxy, following humanity's philosophy of confronting danger rather than waiting for it to arrive. The fleet was made up of ships from dozens of species, all working together under human leadership. But perhaps the most significant change was happening in schools across the galaxy. Children of every species now learned about the event, the day humanity refused to accept the inevitable and chose to fight for a better future. Young minds that had once been taught to accept their place in a rigid hierarchy now learned that courage and determination could overcome any obstacle. On the Zephyrian homeworld, Commander Grixtal taught military strategy to young warriors. But instead of focusing on conquest and domination, his lessons emphasized protection and sacrifice. True strength, he would tell his students, is not about how much you can destroy, but about how much you're willing to give up to save others. The economic changes were just as dramatic. The old system of tribute and exploitation had been replaced with genuine cooperation. Species that had once paid taxes to support the Council's luxury now shared resources freely to build a stronger, more unified galaxy. Human engineers worked alongside Nixari technicians to build better ships. Zephyrian warriors trained human soldiers in advanced combat techniques, but not everyone was happy with the new order. Some of the older, more traditional species struggled to accept humanity's leadership. A few had even formed secret alliances, plotting ways to restore the old hierarchy. They whispered that humans were too young, too inexperienced to guide galactic civilization. These whispers reached Admiral Parker during a security briefing 6 months after the restructuring. Intelligence reports suggested that some council members were planning to challenge human authority, possibly through military action. "Let them come," Parker said calmly. "If they want to test whether we'll defend our principles, they'll learn the same lesson the Gardener did." The galaxy had, indeed, learned that humanity was not to be underestimated. When the Corvani Empire attempted to resume their old practice of enslaving primitive species, human battleships appeared within days to stop them. When pirates began raiding refugee convoys near the galactic rim, human patrol fleets hunted them down without mercy. But humanity's true power wasn't in their weapons, it was in their influence. Species that had never cooperated before began working together, inspired by human examples of sacrifice and determination. The galaxy was becoming something it had never been before, a true community where every member mattered. Ambassador Grant often thought about that first humiliating meeting in these same chambers. The Cathari had told them that humanity was too small, too new to matter in galactic civilization. Now those same aliens came to humans for guidance, asking for advice on everything from military strategy to moral philosophy. The irony was not lost on her. The species that had been offered only vassal status now held the most powerful positions in galactic government. The worlds that had been marked for abandonment were now protected by the strongest fleet in history. The people who had been told they didn't matter had become the guardians of everyone who did. Dr. Alex Chen, whose quantum virus had made victory possible, now worked on projects that would have been unimaginable under the Gardener's control. Artificial intelligences designed to help rather than control. Biological enhancements that preserved free will. Technologies that could terraform dead worlds and bring life to empty space. As the council session ended, representatives from hundreds of species approached the human delegation with requests for assistance, offers of cooperation, and expressions of gratitude. The galaxy had learned that humanity possessed something unique, the stubborn refusal to accept that suffering was inevitable. Children throughout the galaxy now grew up hearing stories about the brave humans who had said no to an ancient evil. They learned that courage wasn't about being unafraid. It was about doing what was right even when you were terrified. They discovered that strength wasn't about dominating others. It was about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The galaxy was safer now, stronger and more united than it had ever been. The ancient cycle of fear and sacrifice had been broken, replaced by hope and cooperation. And at the center of it all stood humanity, the species that had refused to bow to the darkness and had lit a torch that would burn for generations to come. The event had indeed made humanity the most respected and feared species in the galaxy, respected by those who valued justice and compassion, feared by those who preferred the old ways of exploitation and cruelty. It was exactly the kind of reputation that humans could live with, the kind of legacy worth fighting for. The galaxy, had learned that sometimes the greatest courage was not in accepting your fate, but in refusing to accept it at all.